reflection is about awareness. It's not just about reflection, it's about action. So if you are in a position of power, you better use that power to create change. So you can't just sit in the seat and say, here I am. If you are a role model and you are in a position of power, man or woman, use that power to create change. But you better not occupy a seat and do nothing.
Scanning all frequencies. Hello. Welcome back to Designed By with me, Joanna Peña-Bickley. Today, I am sitting down with one of my best friends, sisters, and someone who is so special to me and the world, frankly. Shelley Zalis, a trailblazer who started in online research, but her curious nature that questions the status quo has made her a pioneer for women's equality and a powerhouse CEO behind the female quotient. So about a decade ago, Shelley looked around and realized something was completely off. I want you to picture this. You're at an industry conference where big ideas are flowing, but there are hardly any women in sight. Shelley found herself as the only woman time and time again. And let's be honest, that can get pretty lonely. Not to mention, it's a huge missed opportunity for everybody else. So not one to sit back, Shelley called up a few of her girlfriends and started a revolution with the Girls Lounge at CES. Think of it as a haven where women could network, share, learn, and grow together amid smoke-filled backrooms, late-night lap dances, and tech buzz. Shelley designed a place and a time, and frankly, a future for us. So as one of my closest friends, I'm here to tell you that Shelley has been called a lot of things, but my favorite is Chief Troublemaker. So Shelley, as we dive into this conversation, I'm just curious about the moments that have sparked your incredible journey. Shelley, my sister, where does your story begin?
Wow. Oh my God. Bravo. I have to say, Joanna, thank you. That was, quite a bold and bodacious introduction and really bringing us to the place that we're at today. And just listening to that incredible introduction brought back so many incredible memories for me of where it really did begin and made me think about that first incredible moment where I thought about being an only and lonely and when you are an only and lonely, you think to yourself, gosh, I never want anyone else to feel that way. And that really was that moment when I wanted to go to CES, a Consumer Electronics Show, thinking, once again, I don't want to do that again, going to a show of 150,000 people, less than 3% being women. And when you're going to go to a bathroom and it's going to be no line in the women's room, the line is in the men's room. And he said, shit, I can do that because I've done that so many times. And I rose to the top doing that because I had the confidence to push through, but you just don't want to. It's not fun. You want to have fun. Life is too short. And so I called a few girlfriends and I said, if you know other women, invite them. And so I'm going to go back to that moment because that was where it began. And I want to share that feeling for me because it was that whoosh moment. It was that, I always say there's people that follow their head, which is the textbook. You think about it. It's that cognitive moment where you rationalize, you justify, and you make that decision because you're supposed to. And then there's that heartbeat moment. And my best decisions, follow your heart, that female intuition. Those were my best moments and my best decisions I ever made. And so I invited a few girlfriends, and those were the OGs. And you're an OG, and you know that. And I said, if you know other women, invite them. And 24 hours later, 50 women showed up, and we walked the floor. And I'm going to go back to that moment because it was that feeling that I will never forget. Boom, 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 boom. And we walked the floor. And, a lot of people go look at the technology. And what I remember looking at were the heads that turned. And every single guy's head turned. And I call it a power of the pack moment. A woman alone has power. Collectively, we have impact. A woman alone is invisible. 50 of us, you can't miss us. And again, I have shivers just feeling it because I feel the vibration again. We walked that floor. I felt seen. And it was a whoosh moment. And that was the first most remarkable moment for me. And the second was being surrounded by people just like me. We talked about imposter syndrome. We talked about work-life balance and that there is no such thing as balance. And we started doing deals. We were power women that were sharing and supporting one another. I never had girlfriends in business. And next thing you knew, in my little king size bedroom at the Four Seasons, which I'll never forget, we were sharing technology, and it was power women. We had power of the purse, and we were supporting one another. And the next day, 50 women turned to 100 women, and 100 women to 300 women. And I took the penthouse suite. And I called my hairdresser from LA, said, take my car, drive on over, and let's do hair and makeup. And we started acting like women and not being afraid to be ourselves. And we were doing hair and makeup, and we were in my closet and sharing clothes. And it was just like amazing. And all of a sudden, the name came, and it was called the Girls Lounge. If there was a boys club, now there's a girls lounge. The opposite of boys, girls, the opposite of club is lounge. If there's a boys club, now there's a girls lounge. And that's where the Girls Lounge was born. It was going to be a safe space for women to support other women and be ourselves and not be afraid to be women in business. What a concept. What a concept. And we became friends. And I thought, gosh, if we can create a safe space for women in technology, what about women in media? What about women in marketing? What about women in every single industry? And the Girls Lounge was born. And so I started creating pop-up spaces at predominantly male-dominated conferences, and one pop-up space to another pop-up space to another pop-up space. And that was the moment. And a lot of women at the time said, gosh, but we're not girls, we're women. And I said, have you ever heard of men objectifying boys in the boys club? What is your problem?
Right.
Stop being afraid to be a woman in business. Why do we have to wear, collars up to our necks and put our hair in pony and not wear makeup and pretend we're bringing that emotion to the boardroom? What is wrong with us? Be you.
I love that. But let's go back a little bit. I'd love to go back pre the Girls Lounge, even pre CES. You've had a career. I think about it as like, I feel like the words online research, what people don't realize is to be a great researcher is somebody to be incredibly curious about the world. You have to ask questions. I go, it's kind of, I don't know, for those of you that are Jewish women that are out there listening, we're actually born and bred into this thing where we're always asking questions. It's like, when we get to study the Talmud, it's like, so we make great researchers. Let me tell you, because we're like, it's so core to what we do. So you started in research. What were the questions? Like, how did you get into the space? And because I go, there was this whole entire life before then that, is a global phenomenon today. But take me back to, what was little Shelley up to? How did she get, how did you become?
It's very funny because you talk about the Talmud, and, to do that, you have to dig deep and ask questions. My daughter just had a little baby, a little boy. So I'm a grandmother for the second time. So I have two.
You're a grandma, right?
Okay, grandma. And the person that does the bris, the circumcision, actually was my teacher and taught me Talmud. And he's now the person that does the circumcision. Mm. I'm turning 62 on Sunday. So when I studied the Jewish Bible Talmud, girls were not really supposed to do that. But yet I must have been 12 years old or something. And I always wanted to study it. And this man was, lived in a tiny little house with 12 children or something. And I would say, Rabbi, I want to study the Gemara, because you needed curiosity, always asking questions. And so I just saw him 2 weeks ago because he did the circumcision. Now he must be in his late 70s or something. Uh-huh. He just said the same thing to me. He said, you were that curious girl that would always say, I don't care if I'm a girl, I want to study. And he taught me. And he keeps bringing that up today. He says, you always ask the questions at even the age of 12, always wanting to know why. And so it's just interesting that you brought that up today, because I'm always curious, and I always want to know about possibilities. And I always say there's two types of people: those that see what they see, which is status quo, that follow what they've seen before. Yep. And then there's those that look for possibilities. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I've always built things sometimes most of the time 10 years ahead of
Yes.
curve. And I'm kind of a first, build things that are the first, which is kind of scary. And I would say you start a moment that turns into a movement. And it's kind of hard to do that because being the first, you usually make the mistakes.
Yeah.
And people call those failures. And I'm like, it's not a failure. Or I say I have a favorite failure. And then the other day I said, gosh, people call them failures and they're afraid to fail. No, I call them firsts. You're
Yeah.
trying something
They're
that's never been done.
experiments.
They're
Yeah.
experiments. So stop using the word failure because that sounds so terrible and people are afraid to fail. No, they're firsts.
Yeah.
It's exciting. If you don't try, you'll never know.
You'll never know.
Might be wrong, but guess what? You might be right.
Yeah.
So let's go there. So I was a researcher, market research. And in those days, which, I was 20 years old, I fell into market research. Actually, in college, I saw that little note on the bulletin board. I went to Barnard and I thought I was applying to an ad agency. I thought I was going into this job that was going to be an ad agency. Lo and behold, it was a market research company. I never would have ended up in market research if I thought the job I was applying to was market research because I got a D in statistics. So I did not belong in the business of numbers. If I knew it was numbers, I would not have applied. And it was funny when I sold my company, I was on the front page of the New York Times and my statistics teacher saw Shelley Zalis and he called me up and he goes, "Are you that same girl that was in my class and got a D in my class? Is this you? Is it possible you sold your company for so much money?" And I said, "Yes, it's Nell Banshin." I said, that was me. And I said, "By the way, you were a lousy statistics teacher." I said, "Because you never contextualized the data." I said, I ended up learning how to do storytelling from it. He actually was a great teacher. I ended up with a B minus in the class in the end. And he was laughing and we laughed about it in the end, but it was pretty funny. So I fell into this class, which is a whole other story, into this market
Yes.
research company. But what was fascinating about my start in market research was when I got on the train, I saw this, I'll never forget this. This guy was drinking Tropicana, a container of Tropicana, and he was a homeless person. But I was working on Tropicana at the time, and they had repositioned the packaging. And I was so curious about the package. By the time the guy was finished his package, I said, "Excuse me, sir, may I have your package?" I had to see the packaging of his container because I really loved studying people
Yeah.
because I was a psychology major and I loved people and I still love people. And that's really what I loved about market research. But I always say to be a first, in innovation, you have to be the first, the second, and the third. The first is always the innovator, and you're going to make
Yeah.
those mistakes because you got to try things and innovate and whatever. And that's the first. The second is the copycat. They
Mhm.
always copy,
Yeah.
but they don't really know what's under the hood. And you know this better than anybody.
I do.
The third is the sweeper.
Yep.
And you've already built the ecosystem. They come in, they ride in on that shiny white horse, and they win because they get all the money and they beat you and they beat everybody else. And so for me, I always said you need to be the first, you need to copy yourself, and then you got to beat everyone else because there is no one that is going to beat me at my own game.
Mhm.
And that was always my motto because I was always ahead of everything. And I had to be the first, the second, and the third. And that was, really where I was in my life. And so when I was in market research, I was in Mall Intercept, which was my first job, video storyboards. I did animation, animatics, and tested in
Mhm.
malls. And then I moved to quantitative research, which was at ASI. And then, infomercials. When I had my first child, I was up late at night, feeding the baby, and I saw infomercials and I'm like, "Oh my God, what a concept, direct response." And I loved it. And I started thinking about this whole concept of, infomercials and at what point do people want to buy? And I studied that whole thing. And then websites started. And I thought, wow, what a concept. So I started testing websites and getting usability testing and all that kind of stuff. And I started loving this concept. And I thought, gosh, what if I could migrate research from offline to online? And I had this big idea, but it was in like 1998. And
Mhm.
I standardized ad formats for ad sizes online, on websites and built it built a whole concept of collaborative, bringing advertisers together to standardize ad formats on websites, because you don't have a 32-second commercial and a 28-second commercial. You have a 30-second commercial for standards. So I started creating ad formats that were standard. Then the government called me collusionary. I mean, whole thing.
Yeah.
Started learning how to build collaborative, models, bringing advertisers together. And so I got very good at the power of collaboration, which is how I started understanding you're better together and bringing everyone together to work together.
Yeah.
And then I went to my bosses when I was at ASI. I said, listen, I have this idea of migrating research from offline to online. This was in 1998 when we only had 14.4 modems, way ahead of its time. And my bosses, all men, told me it was not the right time, too early. Nobody was online. And I was sitting on a panel with Larry Mock, the chief research officer of Procter & Gamble. And my bosses were all in the front row of, this conference. And I'm whispering to Larry Mock. And I come off the stage and my bosses, because it was our biggest client, they said, what'd you talk to him about? What'd you talk to him about? I said, I just asked him, when is the right time for me to come to Procter & Gamble and talk to you about migrating research from offline to online? And my bosses said, what did he say? What did he say? I said, he said, come next week. And my bosses said, that's amazing. Paul's going to go, John's going to go, Ringo's going to go, and Star's going to go. I said, but what about Shelley? I got the meeting. I'm going. And they said, it's a boys club. And this is the right team to go. I said, well, if I'm not going, I'm going to cancel the meeting and you can all wait for the right time. And that was that. And so I decided, why am I never right? I am going to take that meeting and I'm going to be the boss because I'm tired of waiting for everyone to tell me when the right time is. And I left. I followed my heart back again and I started my own company. And it was called OTX, Online Testing Exchange. And that was that. And it was that moment of truth once again. And I have so many heartbeat moments, but that I realized it's time to be the chief troublemaker, break every rule that makes no sense, create my own, follow my heart, and be my own boss, write my own rules. I was tired of being the exception to the rule and write my own rules. And that was, the biggest moment of truly the next chapter. And the rest was history. And, it wasn't easy, trust me.
Yeah.
I had to believe in myself. I did not have the money to start my own company. There was nobody online. Those guys were right. But I realized that I had to make it the right time. If I waited and watched, the world would have passed me and I wouldn't have been the mother of online research. And I had to build the ecosystem. I had to build the sample. I had to make it the right time. I had to be the first. And by the way, I had to be the second. And I had to be the third. And I am the mother of online research. And I was way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And it was not an easy journey. And I was the only female CEO top 25 in market research. And I was the pioneer of online research. And I had built every iteration and I had a lot of copycats along the way. But it was the most incredible journey of my life. And building consortiums and bringing people and convincing people and figuring out how to bring something into a world that did not believe and that looked for everything that was wrong and why online wasn't going to work and all the naysayers was not an easy journey. So I've been there, done that before, but it prepped me for how I was going to bring equality into the world as well. So it set me up for all of the reasons why and why not to where I got today as well.
Well, and you were doing this also at a time you're a new mom. Like let's pretend. I think the thing that we share a lot in common, one of which is that we are mother of four, and that ain't easy. You're building this thing, you're raising children, you are nurturing this family, and you're building kind of two families simultaneously. If you think about it, it was the family that became the backbone of your company, and then the family in which, today I feel so lucky, listeners. One of the things that in getting to know Shelley has actually been getting to know her incredible children. And, children are often a reflection of the brilliance of their parents when you get it right. And hers certainly are. But like you had to make lots of trade-offs in doing those two things simultaneously. Talk to me a little bit about some of those things, some of those hard choices that you made.
Hmm. Well, you have four, I have three,
Oh,
and
that's right, 3. 3 plus grandkids.
three,
You get the
three
grandkids first.
beautiful, incredibly children. For me, it wasn't trade-offs, it was choice and
Mm,
integration. And, so many people say work-life balance. That is choice. Life is not 50-50, and life is not neat. And it's okay for it to be messy. And, the one thing, that my father taught me, may he rest in peace, and, was no regret policy. And I never wanted to look back and say, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
mhm,
And so I would always look forward and say, will I regret this decision? And if the answer was yes, I didn't do it. And the one thing that was, always really important to me, and I talk to my kids a lot about this all the time at a young age, was say to them, if there's anything ever important to you, tell me and I will never miss it. I will never miss a moment that matters. Don't tell me you're going to miss me to miss me, but I will always be wherever you want me to be that matters to you. Family will always be first and always my first priority. And so there's 5 dimensions in life: your family, your career, your community, your friends, and the fifth that we always forget about is ourselves.
mhm,
And it's not equal pies. So at every stage, life stage accommodation, at every stage of life, you need to rejigger a little bit. So sometimes you might not be able to prioritize community at the same level, or I would, put my friends and myself together. Sometimes I'd work out with my girlfriends and you know combine it. So we might not have got as big a muscle, but we got the chit chat in, or have breakfast with my girlfriend. Combine things. But family always came first. That was always and that would in my Filofax, which we had at the time, that would be inked. So I would say to my kids, when is the things that matter, and that would go first into the diary, and I'd always put that in as the priority. Or and the other thing is, my husband and I were not mother father roles, we were partnership. And
mhm,
we always said one of us always has to be home. So if he was traveling, I wasn't. If I was traveling, he wasn't. And we shared the responsibility. And he was responsible for finance and sports, and I was responsible for this and that. And if he was out of town, I picked up his responsibility, and we didn't argue. If I couldn't tie the hockey skates tight enough, the ankles would wobble on the ice, and the Jewish mother would feel a little guilty, but it was good enough. And if he wasn't good at the school things, he wasn't good enough at the school things, but it worked. And I can't bake a cake and get it out of a pan, but you know what? Too bad. It would look messy. I didn't care. And, there's little tips and tricks along the way. We did the best we could. And, it was what it was. And you know what? My kids, God bless them, are so self sufficient and independent and confident because they had working parents.
mhm,
And they grew up with that. And that's what makes them so amazing. They
mhm.
see that their parents are, hardworking parents, and they are the same. They're not spoiled. They're like strong, independent, amazing. They were making their own play dates at the age of like 3 or 4. Like when
Yeah,
they knew how to use the phone and make their play dates, they would pick and choose their own play dates. You know,
yeah,
God bless them. That's what makes them such great kids.
yeah. They're amazing. They're
you
just
know
amazing.
and my husband and I, like, he's amazing. He is
Yeah.
so involved. Like, we shared responsibility at home, which made us both have amazing careers. Like, we both knew that that's what we wanted.
Hey, listeners, super exciting news. I'm going to let you in on a top secret innovation that Vibes AI has been working on. Vibes AI has just dropped new audio vibrational therapies. If you're looking to enhance your memory, relaxation, focus, or overall cognitive wellness, this one's for you. Vibes AI has been working with certified sound and music therapists to design vibrational audio therapies that are designed to connect your body, mind, and intention. You can choose vibrational therapies that reduce anxiety, encourage deep focus, enhance concentration, and improve cognitive function, bringing you back to a healthy alignment. Don't miss out on this incredible cognitive wellness innovation. I want you to open up your favorite podcasting platform and search for Vibes AI, or simply ask Alexa, open Vibes Therapy to follow the Vibes AI frequency.
Welcome back.
And I think that's an important part of this. So often I think that I love that you've talked about that integration, and that I think so often that society or television tells us, it's about balance, it's about this and making trade-offs. But in fact, what it was a negotiation around priority.
And it's my kids also were very involved in my work.
Yeah.
I mean, I have avatars of them in my research surveys. I made them into avatars, and their kids were part of focus groups, and they were involved in helping develop the business. And I always say, when you love what you do, it's called passion. When you don't, it's called stress. And I'm not saying there was not a lot of pressure involved in building a company from nothing, but it was just a part of what we did. But it didn't define me. Work never defined who we are. We lived our life, and it did not define our family at all. And we do everything together as a family. We have a very tight-knit family, and we chase total solar eclipses. We do family trips together. And
So are you going on this next one that I
yeah,
think is like going across the Midwest?
it's across central
Yeah,
US.
yeah.
So we're going to Dallas, but we have a very tight-knit family, and we travel together. We work hard, we play hard. And this house is Grand Central Station, so a lot of the kids come here and hang out, and we live for our Scrabble games as a family, and chasing eclipses, and so it's a real tight family unit, and it's wonderful.
I think sometimes through the sense of whether it's social media or things like that, we always just see the good side of somebody's story, and we don't often see the struggle. We don't get to see that we as human beings make mistakes, or that we're not, there's moments that we're never proud of, but we don't often share them. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those squeamish moments that you've said, wait a minute, that's not something I'm proud of, but I really actually, I had a moment of learning and I've evolved from it.
Well, oh God, I have so many of those. Like,
I know,
yeah,
but we don't talk about them.
multitasking on steroids is quite difficult. And people say, how do you do it all? Uh, no one does it all. Everything is trade-offs, as you said. And the the choices, but it's choice.
Yeah.
And it is choice. And do I have time to do everything I want to do for myself? Absolutely not. I'm exhausted a lot of the time. But also, who's kidding who? Like, when I am on airplanes, I'm not working on airplane. Like, and I'm the first to admit, I watch really dumb television. I mean, I'm not, like, sit and I will just binge watch TV. Like, I need time for me, and just to shut off. And there is no pretending about that. I am the first, most
What's
direct.
one of your guilty pleasures? Is there something?
Netflix recommends for me.
Okay.
I'm watching Turkish TV.
Yeah.
I'm watching Spanish TV. I'm watching subtitles. I don't even care. As long as I don't have to think, I am so happy to just shut off. When I have time to go to Soul Cycle, I sit in the back row where no one can see me and pick on me, just so that I can completely shut off. Now I'm just so happy to be with my grandchildren, to have time with them. And the work I'm doing now is by choice. It's just giving back with generosity, what I wish I had my entire career, which is girlfriends in business, to have a network of women supporting women. I did not have that.
No.
It was hard. It was really, really hard. Talk about, the real life, rising the ranks in a world of men, or when,
Or when women were competing with other women. I think there was this, we
by the
had
way,
this,
you still have that.
it
I
still
mean,
we do,
don't,
but I think that we've a new generation. I would say, and I gotta say, what, there was a point in time, and I certainly saw it. I saw it in my own career. I'm sure you did too, where there was this idea of scarcity. Like there's only this one place at the top, and only one of us going to make it. So we're going to kill each other to get there, which was actually behaving like men
yeah,
because
I
it
mean,
wasn't scarce. That
but I
that
still
was
get
the
a lot of
lie.
phone calls. I still coach a lot of women that are bringing all of us together, which we never had, and now we're all bringing up that next generation of women to support each other, which is terrific. But I still have a lot of women that are still struggling in that environment where they struggle with their male colleagues, but also with women colleagues. I mean, that still does exist, and it's still happening. So that's not gone yet. I mean, we still have some work to do. I'm not going to say that we don't. We still have some work to do in that area. But even with me, when I sold my company, and I was back in a boys club,
Yeah.
I was told not to be emotional and not that. And I had sold them for a lot of money, and I was at the top of my game, and I was pulled aside because, tears came down my eyes when they were moving my employees around like chess pieces. And once again, my head said, I'm supposed to agree. And my heart said, no, I'm too old for this shit. I'm not going to tolerate that ever again. And I went and gave a speech to thousands and said, bring emotion to the boardroom. And I just went right for it. And this is how we're going to change the future. And we could talk about the future, but I won't handle that anymore. And that's how we're going to rewrite the rules. And I was, in a publicly traded company, and
Yeah.
we're supposed to do this and we're supposed to do according to who? According to who? And that's sort of how I felt. I'm like, I'm sorry, who wrote that book?
Hmm.
Because I'm not sure who the boss is of the
Right.
world or of the
Yeah.
boardroom.
Yeah.
But
Where in your SEC filings does that rule exist? Could you I that's my favorite question. It's like where in the world in that what rule book? Is that in the employee manual? Is that, like let's see it, where is it codified? And the reality is these unwritten rules that kept us out.
I mean, yeah. And so I decided, like, if I just allow someone to decide that for all of us, it will be decided. But
That's right.
while we're still here with power, and
Hmm.
I'm the co-founder of See Her. If you could see her, you could be her. Well, I'm rewriting that now because I goofed on that. Well, that was fine then. That was
Yeah,
the
for
first.
the point where you started, sure.
That was the first. But now I'm copying it, but I'm skipping second. I'm going to third.
What
The
did you
sweet.
learn? So what did you learn? If you'll take me from what it was to then what it will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, because we're gonna skip step two and go straight to the third.
What was the two that you think you made the mistake on?
Okay, so we'll go to mistake. No, we're gonna go to learn. We're
Yeah, to
gonna
learning, to moment of learning. Yeah.
yeah,
It was an experiment
yeah,
because it hasn't been done before.
yeah. What I learned was, so I wrote, if you could see her, you could be her. That's about reflection.
Hmm.
So that's okay. Because you
Yeah.
do need step, but reflection is about awareness. It's not just about reflection, it's about action.
Yeah.
So if you are in a position of power, you better use that power to create change. So you can't just sit in the seat and say, here I am.
Hmm.
If you are a role model and you are in a position of power, man or woman,
Hmm.
use that power to create change. But you better not occupy a seat and do nothing, because that actually sets us back. Because if you do nothing, then the people coming up behind you don't want to be you.
Hmm.
You better use your power to create change.
Yeah.
So if I see you, I want to be you only if
Hmm.
you're using your position of power and doing something that is going to impact change.
Right. And doing all the little things. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's also understanding that the world has lots of little mechanisms. We live in a world of systems. And a part of um, making that change is understanding that there's big change and little change. And it's about sharing all of the ways that you can change, right, with the people that you're bringing up with you.
And you better bring people up with you, because
Yeah.
if you're by yourself doing it,
You're
it
not a
is
leader.
gonna,
Wait, you're not a leader. You're not a leader. I've always believed this. And somebody once told me this. She said, is if you look behind you and there's nobody there, who are you leading? And I went, that's it's a really good point. Is that sometimes those of us who maybe think and move very, very fast need to take a pause for a moment and figure out how to bring people with you, because that is
but
leadership.
so by the way, it's so interesting that you say that, because I have been successful in making a moment, take a moment into, I don't even know that it's a movement, but into creating change. Or when I
Mhm.
say the World Economic Forum says it was like 131 years to close the gender gap, so ridiculous, we could do it in 5.
Yeah, if
Or
we really wanted
I
to.
should do it if you want equality is, and then we wrote equality is possible if you want it. And that made people go, wow, interesting. How? And I said, well, when we got invited to the World Economic Forum, my invitation was, and this is heart and head again, we want you to come, but you might not feel welcome. And I'm like, okay, head said don't go. Who wants to be invited into a mean girl club or into
Yeah.
a biggest world where no one was able to break the pattern? And then my heart said, I gotta go. But if I go alone, nothing's gonna happen. What did I do? I brought all of us.
Hmm.
Power of the pack. And I wrote Power of the Pack because I've always brought a pack. Well, when you bring a pack, it's instant gratification and it's instant change. 50 of us, boom. You can't miss us.
Nope.
It's exactly what happened when we went to see it. You couldn't miss us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a one and done. I didn't stop. 50, 100, a snowball. What happens with the snowball effect?
Hmm.
So if you wait and watch, or you think that one person is going to create change, it's not. You
Right.
got to bring, and then you have to be authentically consistent, 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 consistent. When I first started, even online research, people thought I was, and I could say this on your show,
Yeah.
fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And they, they still do, and I am, but I'm consistently crazy. And it's true. And,
Yep.
but at the beginning, they didn't believe me, that I could bring
Yeah.
online research. If I showed you this, and there's no social media, so there's no proof of this, but it is somewhere. People said, people lie online, lie,
Yeah.
LIE, don't tell the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, well, do you really think people in telephone surveys,
Are
you don't even
telling.
know that they're, you know, the right people? Like, how do you know on the other end of the phone? Like,
People lie everywhere, not
everywhere.
just online.
Right, but they were trying to discredit
Credit you. Yeah.
online. I'm like, and I was the only one online, and I had to build a whole ecosystem, and I had to replicate RDD, random digit dialing. And I'm like, oh, so picking people out of the phone book, you believe that, but because I'm trying something new, you're gonna make discredit me. And I mean, you have no idea what I
Yeah,
had to
I
do.
do.
That's a whole other story of how to get this in, and how I had to
Yep.
convince people, including putting chocolate chip cookies and milk on the top of the data so that they would read it while they were eating my homemade cookies. Like, you have no idea what I had to do to get people to try before they would buy,
Yeah.
and be consistent and push and push. And they call me pushy, but I was
Yeah.
like, and I had to put my name as Jane Doe
Hmm.
to hide, because Joe Farrell was the king and godfather of the movie studios. But like, okay, anyways. And then when I was coming into the business of equality, there was no DEI, and there was no women, and there was no any of this. And they're like, equality, like there wasn't, and I said, and I don't put me in the bucket of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm not going in that bucket.
Yeah.
And I don't want that money. You don't want the money? No, I don't want to be in that
Oh,
bucket.
wait a minute. And by the way, there isn't that much money.
And by the way, there was no DE&I, but
That's
I don't
right.
want to be in HR. Don't put me in
That's
an
right.
HR bucket. It was HR. Don't put me in HR. This was ahead of 10 years again, ahead.
Yeah.
Don't, I want to be in the C-suite. I want you to give me CMO budget or CEO budget. I want to be in the C something or another.
Yeah.
HR is going to go in. Don't put me. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? And behind my back, they would talk about me like I'm a loony. I said, I've been there before. Okay. I'm not crazy. Look at my track record.
But it's been brilliant. And here's what I will tell you. It's people like Mark Cuban, right, who has adopted, frankly, the language that you invented, along the way to talk about it in that framing, right? That it's good business. Equality has always been good business. You can take a look at, the disability, right? People with disabilities, which I think this past CES that I loved that we did on the walk. And the reason, you did it and you think about it in the business equality, people like me who have disabilities are a $9.2 trillion opportunity that is left on the table. Them and their caregivers, right? Because we have care systems around us. And when we create inclusive products or marketing campaigns or technologies or even services that addresses with dignity those populations, there is a business to be had. And so it's good business because if we think about the society we live in, the part of the business thing that I think is so important that you touch on, and I think that has been instrumental in this, is that you are saying by the way the method of which women will achieve equality. And that is actually far more brilliant because you see the systems in place and the things that need to be built before, because equality ain't going to happen on its own. You've got to change all the little systems, and some of those systems don't exist yet. So to that point, one of those systems was we weren't. And to your point, there's some of us that still have that learning to do about competition. And all of those things are part of the systems that you've identified and said, here's how we start to either unravel it or change the behavior. And so that it becomes, we want to see that change. You're not the only. And the way to close the gap, right, is in order to ensure that we are so clearly aware that those systems exist, or that they exist without these mechanisms, and this is what's holding us back.
Yeah. And
It's a brilliant way to exist.
well, listen, you are such a big part of the evolution, I have to say, Joanna, because, so much of design, which you are leading the way on and bringing all of us with you, is around inclusively designing. And, you have to have foresight.
Yeah.
It can't be retrofitting.
No.
It has to be, and so much of, and I would say, so many people think about pointing fingers, and it's not that things were wrong. It's just most of the design of the workplace was designed by men for men, because
For
women just
men.
weren't in the workplace as early as men were. We came in later. And
If you think about it, we didn't come in, and I'd say some of us were there, but the big numbers was in my mom's generation, was the first set of the boomers that came in the 80s, right? 70s to 80s. If you think about it, we'd just gotten our ability to have our own credit. Like, let's look at like where we have been in history and understand that part of history was they broke open the doors in numbers thing, but there was no system there for them. It wasn't designed by them. They were in a system that was designed by a bunch of dudes and schlongs, right? That actually kind of didn't really give a shit about them being there. They got patted on the head and said, yeah, equality.
well, they were secretaries,
Yeah.
like traditional secretaries, and number counters, and all we kept doing was adding things. We never, paused and modernized.
Mm-hmm.
And so this to me is an opportunity to, close a door and open a window. And,
Mhm.
to me, this is our window now
Yeah.
of modernizing the workplace for everyone. And
Yeah.
if it's inclusively designed, it will work for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's just all that we're saying. And that's what is exciting me the most,
Yeah.
when we think about the future. And, the female quotient is about, as you said, changing the equation and bridging
Yeah.
the gap. We say closing the gap. World Economic Forum
Yeah.
says 131 years. We say do it in 5. And the new campaign, the new campaign that we're launching is a really pretty exciting one. It's the flipping point. We're at a flipping point moment.
Yeah, we
It's
are.
point meets moonshot mindset,
Yeah.
and we just need CEOs with a moonshot mindset.
Well, and
And
we're in an opportunistic place right now. Look, we're in the middle of an economic super cycle, right? We are right now in the middle of the biggest transformation that human history has ever experienced. And a part of the nonsense that is going on in the world, and there is a lot of nonsense, right, that is going on. We have both an economic super cycle hitting a convergence point. And we know this out of history, right? So if we look at every industrial revolution, it's when these general purpose technologies start to converge. This is a researcher when shit starts to converge, right? We start to see things go into a super cycle and change happens at a rate and pace that often most people feel today that's actually happening at a rate and pace that's actually too much for them to handle. But we, as in human history, you can't look back at any one of the previous industrial revolutions and you go, if you look at that human history, you go, oh, well, this hadn't happened and this happened. And you're absolutely right. It didn't. And what is happening right now, and I think is the time for your point, is it's more than a brand, because I actually think it's where we see a massive change. We are amidst a great transformation. It is a societal transformation. Now, we are completely in control of that transformation. That transformation is coming as you have artificial intelligence connecting with biosciences, right? And inevitably, one of the things that I think that you have been so core and instrumental is remembering that it's always been about data. The thing that is fueling those things is data. And then it is that connectivity of things like the Internet of Things, where we have connected everyone to everything. We're not there yet, but in the next 1 to 3 years, a part of I think the social fabric fraying that is effectively happening is that we as a society are in cognitive overload. And if we get this right, there's a lot that could happen wrong, but if we get this right, this is about utilizing artificial intelligence to do what it does best. It does this beautiful thing that is about refining that data. So if data is the new oil, AI has always been the refinement mechanism to spit out something different, something offloading tasks and things that, frankly, brilliant people. There's a lot of problems in the world. We have a lot of solving to do. So if an AI is going to answer my email or turn on the lights for me, then so be it, because actually we as human beings have a lot to contend with. And so I think a part of what your positioning is, and I think the algorithm, I remember I was back at IBM Watson when we
yep,
had this conversation. I was taking you
true.
through the integral of how Watson, like how we were going to bring Watson to healthcare and things. And I remember walking with you and Talia through IBM's research center and saying, listen, everything, by the way, at that point was already controlled by algorithms. Your Netflix, hey, that's AI. That is machine learning. We were already in this place. We said, but when it comes to, and this is the importance, our health, our workplaces, our society, what it really is here to do is we are producing so much data that what's going to happen is that we're going to be in a state of both cognitive overload and attention deficit. And we're going to be in a place where we feel stuck and not making the right decisions. And it's going to, when we get into gross generalizations, and I use this, is that when we grossly generalize, it's actually because our brains are actually malfunctioning in a point of cognitive overload. Part of
Yeah.
cognitive experience design is knowing how much load the human brain can take on. And right now, we are inundated in our attention economy, inundated with information that we are not able to process. And so it makes us stereotype. It makes us not critically think. We are in a place of inability, and where AI stands, if we can use it right, with the right barriers around it, if we use it right, it should augment us and it should help us process that information in a manner that is better fit for us to solve the problems that are in front of us. Now, that feels a little optimistic given our current state of the union, but we are in this transformation. Everybody here that's listening to us, inclusive of you, everybody at the the equality lounges, our opportunity is to get in the game
Yeah,
because this transformation is happening in a super cycle that is so fast. And we don't have 5 years, it's 1 to 3. Okay. That's the rate of transformation that's happening. And in that transformation, we're not Gen Z. Keep saying we're not Gen Z. We're not this. We're actually Gen T. This is going to be the generation that transforms everything. But a part of that is that we have to lean in really hard to the problem solving and decide what's that future that we want, because it is changing. It is changing now. And if we don't codify, I love one of the things that you did is you brought us together just a few weeks ago. It feels like a few weeks ago, given that we lost track of time, but to actually begin putting those um, those guardrails, right? The principles forward for how we as women want to be represented in that data, how we will utilize that information, and more. And I think really importantly, you talked about this. There have been a lot of women that have been in the trajectory of artificial intelligence. Look, I've been at it for 15 years, but this is a 50-year-old technology. And it wasn't that there weren't women in it. There were lots of women, but
I'm
we have a lot of hidden figures on that pathway right now. I could name 15 of them, which I was so angry at this New York Times article that I went out and did the AI Her Story video. I said, this is it. I cannot deal with this anymore because we're not going to repeat the mistakes that we made in the first part of the internet. We have the opportunity to change technology and the trajectory of equality for everyone and the way that we're represented in data sets, because if we're not represented, that AI is not going to work for you. Not in your healthcare, not in your mortgage, not in anything. And so we want to make sure that I think what we have to do is actually lean in, get the AI literacy and the skills, right? And get our hands dirty with solving the problems. But we have to make the safe spaces to do so. And I think that's the next evolution of what you're talking about. I'm not passionate about this topic at all, guys.
but that's what it takes. And and I think that, you know, that is the power also of women, is the passion, the purpose. And when you look at what we bring to the table, I
Yeah.
mean, look at you. I mean, like, watch you work. I'm sorry, but this is what we're missing at the table.
Yeah. Look, we're in the midst. I think I want to talk about the present right now of AI because I think it's really an important one. And the present of AI today, and I think it's been a hard year it's been an interesting year, but I think it's been a hard year for a lot of people. But I'm going to emphasize something that's been going on with AI and anti-Semitism. And some of what is, I think, at the heart of, look, there are bad actors in every generation, and there are lots of struggles. But I have to say that this year, being a Jewish woman, it's been a tough year. Whether it was the attacks on 10/7, or the rise of anti-Semitism in our own cities in America, where frankly, we as American Jews had always, I felt like, had a safe space um, amongst each other, but even amongst in public, that for the first time that you have friends that are either the victims of an anti-Semite, my dyslexia is getting anti-Semitic attack, right? Whether it's in a subway or on a city street or our synagogues being desecrated, right? But the thing that we're seeing, and I think it's an important part to have this, is that there is disinformation, and that disinformation is growing at a rate and pace where AI is actually being utilized to propagate old tropes and old storylines. I mean, anti-Semitism has been around forever, but we are a canary in a coal mine as a people. And the thing that I think is so important that we have this conversation as Jewish women, that we often say, how did we get to World War II? How did we get to the Spanish Inquisition? You know, it was when Jews were told, tamp it down a little bit. Don't be so Jewish. And that's the beginning of something. And I think where we can have a really good future, we have to deal with the present that we have right now and how we look at making sure that we are using not just our voices, but in our actions of how this technology is being used to hurt people that we love and communities that we love, that we're a part of.
You know, it's it's a big issue because it's why everyone is saying, diversity, they want to eliminate the
Yeah.
diversity in AI too on the
Mhm.
same,
In the same breath. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at that's, an algorithm is a process,
Hmm.
and we're lacking process
We are.
in AI.
Yes, we are.
And that is the issue because, and diversity is not representation. And that is where we need to start, really hunkering down here because we need diversity in design,
Hmm.
and we need um, representation in data,
Yep.
and we need process in the algorithm.
Hmm.
And we need to have check marks along the way to ensure that there is safety and security in data input, data output, and in the entire everything.
Yeah.
So
At every
that
step of it.
in every step of the way, because that is what is missing here.
Yeah.
Because right now, junk in is creating real hazards, and hate is being spread because the disinformation and the magnitude of it,
Yeah.
and the people that are putting it in and that are smart in how they are doing it is overwhelming the feed.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem. And so, and they're outsmarting
They're outsmarting our governments.
our governments, and
Our
that is
our
the
our
problem.
companies
So
are
the
being
problem,
naive.
correct. So my problem is I don't, no matter what we do, we don't want to be the same problem that is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to fix the whole system. And if you told me today that we could eliminate generative AI
Hmm.
completely so that it will get rid of the hate that is working,
Hmm.
I would vote to get rid of the whole thing in favor of
Yeah.
us having our say in it, because right now they're winning.
Oh, yeah.
I want to turn off everything
Pe-
because I hate it,
People are
literally.
acting in
Because what is
defiance of their
going on
best
right
interest.
now, yes, it is a big mess. And so I would shut everything down because until we can figure out how to fix this, it is an issue because there's no safety guards protecting the
No.
disinformation, because the disinformation is
Well,
overtaking.
and let's call it what it is. It's propaganda and lies, right? And when you create storylines that we as human beings are susceptible to, we're susceptible to stories. And if you've never met somebody who's Jewish, right? Let's just, because we're 1% of the population, it's possible that maybe somebody in your circle isn't. And I say this because it's not just happening to Jewish people, it's happening to Black women. Like this level of disinformation is happening in a way that is so malicious and so pervasive that it is turning us in times. It is designed to turn us against each other. And you always have to ask yourself who benefits? Who benefits from that? Right? Because somebody somewhere, whoever's the intention behind it on the generative side of it, is who benefits from that. And so to your point around the ensuring of, training with data models, what are the safeguards? What are the, deep fakes, right? The whole idea of a deep fake, now it has been used for good. Like a really good example of where it's used for good is when you use it in medical settings where physicians are creating like deep fakes to do scenario planning around surgeries. That's an amazing ability that you don't have to do it. But we need to limit its usage in communications where it can say, you know what, this deep fake of Shelley says this when Shelley never said that. Or it says, hey, Joe Biden said this and he didn't say that, or Joanna said this and didn't say that. We don't have that. And I think a part of the conversation we have to, is we as a citizenry have to step up and get involved in the data collection, in the creation of the codification of things like what you've done at FQ, right, as the first step. But we actually have to create systems of accountability.
Yeah, no, there's so much work to be done, and I think everything should be taken down until we do it, because even in medicine,
Yeah.
we're not even sure, who's using
Who's in
it
the data set?
responsibly, and
Right.
so that could create, some serious and significant issues. And we're starting to find it even from the companies that we thought know how to use it responsibly are not. And so I think that we're not sure right now. So,
No, you're absolutely right.
so
And I think one
so
of the
much for
first
that.
things that we're missing, and I think you probably appreciate this, one of the things that we're missing is we need to think about data from, I think there's a couple things that are happening in this. And often data just feel like data is us. It's the information we emit into the world. And if we don't have rules about the information that we are emitting into the world, there is no way for us to control the algorithms that are there. So to your point around shit in, shit out, is that what the things that we're missing at a fundamental stage is just, regulate. You talked about, governments and what we should do and how we might be able to shut it down. But the reality is that the first regulation that we are missing, at least on this side of the planet, is the regulation of what data belongs to what and to whom and how you use it. Because until we have that, everything else is a joke.
Capital bold.
Yeah.
Exclamation point.
So, um, let but let's also be, and I think it's important for listeners for us to say that we show optimism as well. And I think
100%.
right,
Listen,
it's like
democratization in every way to me is queen, and I'm very, very excited about it. And
yeah,
for me, you hit a topic that is the part that is scary, but I got to say, on the whole, I am so optimistic, so excited. There are so many positives. We're working on so many exciting things, and I want to leave on the high, because
yes,
that
of
to me
course.
is
Well,
where we're
like
going.
in
Because
life,
yeah,
in
yeah,
every experiment, we on a society are living an experiment. Now we're living through a very painful part of the experiment. We need to come out of it, and we need to come out of it as smarter,
oh
right?
yeah.
And not repeating of the same material mistakes that were made that came before it,
Yeah,
right?
so we
And
learn
what
from
we
those,
learned. And
and
as an architect of change, the question I have for you is what or who is shaping your opinions about the future?
oh, for me, I love lived experiences, and as you said in the opening, which is such a great way to move forward. The future is feminine, not female, but the future is feminine. And it's about the power of passion and purpose and collaboration, and, and it's not about male, female. It's about the future is feminine and consciousness and intentional action and positivity and proactivity and designing the life that we all want to lead. And, that's why I love that this is all about design, because with intentionality, we can design our future. And it is with the feminine, which is, purpose and passion. And when, to me, purpose and passion, when you live with purpose and passion, you're unstoppable. And together we're unstoppable.
Speaking of unstoppable, I love the memory of being at your startup in Chicago after school, getting to walk in on creative meetings and contributing my input to things like The Matrix, Nokia, and NASA.
That was a lot of fun. One of the things that I think that I loved about having you all in the office, whether it was you or Tom or Leah or Rebecca, was that frankly, sometimes you had better ideas than we did, the adults in the room, and we wanted to integrate with those ideas. I always felt like your ideas gave us edge and gave us new perspective. And so when we talk about having multi-generational rooms, it just so happened that, your after school care happened to be my office. Or my design studio. And so, all of those times it was great. I know that, your sister would actually walk into a room, look at my work and go, oh no, you got it wrong. It should be this. And what's really funny is that she's a professional writer now.
I know, it kind of was like just a preamble to her becoming this writer. I mean, I see it every day. And the one thing I see that is ever evolving in this landscape is lifting as you climb. And when I say lifting as you climb, I mean that there is a person behind you. You're always trying to help. And I think Shelley very much said it in the opening quote, which is, if you don't have a line of people when you're in the seat, then you need to get out of the seat and get out of there, because you need to be a representative for everyone who's coming after you. And I would love to hear how you spoke about it earlier, but in more depth, how you're lifting as you climb on an AI front, or like you do with the AI Design Core, you did it at IBM, Amazon, and you're currently doing with Vibes AI.
Thanks for acknowledging that. It's a humbling experience when you've been the only in a room. And, we talked about self-advocating and advocating for other women, but the other part is the advocacy can't stop in the room. It has to be all the time, and it has to be constant, and you can never stop doing it. And so I always look at a big part of my role is to open doors and opportunity. I can open doors and give you an opportunity. The rest has to be up to you. And so I actually gain joy from seeing, seeing other people that I get to bring into the room with me to learn. And when you are in that space and you have learned and you pick it up, you know what, carry the torch forward. So many women who lit my torch taught me as a mentee, people like Hillary Clinton, people like Gloria Steinem. When you're in the room with those women, they actually take an active role in lighting the torch of the women around them and feeling free to leave it in your hands. They don't have to finish the sentence. They don't have to close the deal. They don't feel in competition with you. And frankly, I have been in meetings with them plus Shelley and people at the White House. Shelley has opened so many doors for me, and she gets joy from it. And because she gets joy from it, I pass that joy on to all of the people I mentor. And so when I think about it in the AI Design Core, that's part of the reason why I think it's so important for us to not be hidden figures in the world of AI, because there are so many Latinas, there's so many women in AI that their stories aren't getting told. And because I'm a good storyteller, one of the things I think it's really important is for us to actually share their stories, lift them up with us. And don't be afraid to lift yourself up while you're at it.
One of the things, you tell me this quote often by Shirley Chisholm, and I want you to say it to the listeners because I think it's important they hear it.
You know what? Okay, so Shirley Chisholm actually said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
And amen to that.
Well, and I'm going to give it even a little bit more context for now. It was Kamala Harris who said, when the door is shut, closed, you kick the bleeping door in. And I really subscribe to that school because I have had to kick the bleeping door in so many times. And I have to tell you, the boys don't always like it. You're not invited to the table. It's come on, get invited to the table. But listen, I do it, and I try to do it with conviction and advocacy. Conviction in an idea that I've got, conviction in another woman's idea, making sure that I acknowledge it's her idea. And with the advocacy of bringing, Shelley talked about bringing those women with you. We got to bring the women with us. We've literally bring them into the meeting with you.
I absolutely adore that, especially right now in what we're living in. I think reminding ourselves to bring that folding chair wherever we go. I don't care if the room is small or a corporate conference room, because guess what? We're not going back.
No, we're not. And you know what, Rachel? The minute that you remove a choice from a menu, right, in an app, or the choice from a product on a shelf, or the choice of a right from our lives, baby, that's the minute you're going to see the feminine start a revolution.
On that thought, read us out.
This episode was written and produced by the AI Design Corps at Aurora 21 in the heart of New York's magical Hudson Valley. Special thanks to the musical talents of Rachel Bickley, our podcast sound designer. Our theme music was composed by Substance Studios. If you're already following the show, you're well on your way to designing a better future. If not, what are you waiting for? It's time to join the magic. Go to your favorite podcast service and search Designed By with Joanna Peña-Bickley and hit follow.